Welcome to Lesson 4 of Week 11, focusing on assurances and certifications. This lesson examines the SF-424B and related certification documents that accompany federal grant applications, explaining what you are legally committing to when you sign these forms. The SF-424B contains assurances and certifications that your organization must agree to as a condition of applying for and receiving federal funds. Unlike the SF-424 cover sheet, which captures factual information, the SF-424B contains legal commitments. By signing, your authorized representative attests that your organization meets certain requirements and will continue to comply throughout the grant period. These certifications are not mere formalities. They are binding legal attestations with real consequences for false certification. Understanding what you are certifying helps ensure your organization is actually in compliance and can meet its commitments. Signing certifications your organization cannot actually meet creates serious risks. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the major categories of assurances and certifications. You will know what lobbying restrictions require. You will recognize debarment and suspension certification requirements. You will understand civil rights compliance obligations. You will appreciate the legal weight of these documents and consequences of false certification. Note that these are legal attestations. Consult legal counsel if you have questions about your organization's compliance. This lesson has 4 primary learning objectives. First, you will understand the purpose and legal significance of federal assurances and certifications. These documents exist to ensure that organizations receiving federal funds meet basic requirements and operate appropriately. They carry legal weight that distinguishes them from other application materials. Second, you will identify the major certification categories and what each requires. Certifications cover lobbying, debarment, civil rights, drug-free workplace, and other areas. Understanding what each category requires helps you assess your organization's compliance. Third, you will recognize the consequences of false certification. Certifying compliance when your organization does not actually comply can result in serious penalties, including disallowed costs, debarment from future funding, and potential criminal liability. Understanding consequences motivates thorough compliance verification. Fourth, you will learn to verify organizational compliance before certifying. Signing should follow confirmation that your organization actually meets the requirements being certified. This verification protects your organization from inadvertent false certification. Understanding the nature of federal assurances establishes appropriate seriousness about these documents. Legal commitments distinguish assurances from routine paperwork. When your authorized representative signs the SF-424B, they make legally binding attestations on behalf of your organization. These are not suggestions or intentions. They are certifications of fact and commitment. Condition of award means compliance with assurances is required to receive funding and to retain it throughout the grant period. Agencies can and do terminate awards or disallow costs when organizations fail to comply with their certified commitments. Compliance is not optional once you have certified. Ongoing obligation means these commitments continue throughout the grant period, not just at the time of application. Your organization must maintain compliance with each certification for the duration of the award. Changed circumstances that affect compliance must be addressed. Organizational responsibility means the entire organization is bound by these certifications, not just the person who signed. Every employee working on the grant, every activity funded by the grant, and every expenditure charged to the grant must comply with what was certified. Lobbying restrictions are among the most prominent federal grant certifications. The prohibition prevents use of federal funds for lobbying activities. Federal grant money cannot be used to attempt to influence congressional legislation, executive branch actions, or federal contract and grant awards. This restriction protects the integrity of democratic processes and federal decision-making. The definition of lobbying for these purposes includes attempting to influence legislation at any level of government, attempting to influence executive orders or other executive action, and attempting to influence the award of federal contracts, grants, or cooperative agreements. Covered activities include both direct lobbying, where your organization contacts officials, and grassroots lobbying, where you encourage others to contact officials. Using federal funds to mobilize constituents to pressure legislators is prohibited just as direct contact would be. The certification requires you to attest that appropriated federal funds have not been used and will not be used for lobbying. If your organization does conduct lobbying, it must be funded entirely from other sources with complete separation from federal grant funds. Beyond the basic prohibition, lobbying disclosure requirements create additional obligations. The SF-424B form, Disclosure of Lobbying Activities, is required if your organization has used non-federal funds for lobbying activities related to obtaining federal awards. Even though federal funds cannot be used for lobbying, if you lobby for federal funding using other money, you must disclose this activity. Disclosure scope requires identifying any payments made to lobbyists or lobbying firms for services related to obtaining federal contracts, grants, or cooperative agreements. This includes payments made by your organization or by any parties acting on your behalf. Ongoing updates are required if lobbying activities change after your initial disclosure. If you engage additional lobbyists or lobbying activities occur after submission, you must file updated disclosure. The obligation continues throughout the award period. Penalties for false or incomplete disclosure can be significant. Failure to file required disclosures or filing inaccurate information violates federal law. Penalties can include civil fines and potential criminal liability for knowing violations. Debarment and suspension certification confirms your organization can legally receive federal funds. The definition of debarment is exclusion from eligibility to receive federal contracts, grants, and other assistance. Organizations and individuals can be debarred for various causes, including fraud, criminal conduct, or serious violations of federal requirements. Suspension is temporary exclusion pending investigation or legal proceedings. Certification required attests that your organization and its principals are not currently debarred, suspended, proposed for debarment, or otherwise excluded from participation in federal assistance programs. This certification must be accurate at the time of signing. Covered parties include the organization itself, its officers and directors, owners with significant control, and key personnel who will work on the grant. If any of these parties are excluded, your certification would be false, and your organization generally cannot receive the award. Verification through the sam.gov exclusions database allows you to confirm status before certifying. Search for your organization and key individuals to verify no exclusions exist. Document this verification. Do not assume exclusion status. Verify it directly. Civil rights compliance certification commits your organization to non-discrimination in federally funded activities. Non-discrimination requirements prohibit discrimination in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. Your organization must ensure that benefits, services, and participation opportunities are available without discrimination. Protected classes under various civil rights statutes include race, color, and national origin under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, sex under Title IX of the Education Amendments, disability under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, and age under the Age Discrimination Act. Additional protections may apply depending on the specific program. Program scope extends to all activities that receive or benefit from federal assistance. This includes direct grant activities, programs that receive sub-award funding, and activities that benefit from federally purchased equipment or facilities. The non-discrimination obligation follows the federal funding. Statutory basis for these requirements includes multiple federal laws that collectively prohibit discrimination across protected characteristics. By certifying compliance, you attest that your organization follows all applicable civil rights requirements in its federally funded activities. Drug-free workplace certification requires maintaining appropriate policies and procedures. Policy requirement means your organization must have and maintain a drug-free workplace policy. This policy must prohibit the manufacture, distribution, dispensing, possession, or use of controlled substances in the workplace. The policy must be published and distributed to employees. Employee notification requires informing all employees working on the grant about the drug-free workplace policy and the penalties for violations. Employees must know what is prohibited and what consequences they face for violations. This notification should be documented. Awareness program establishment requires requires ongoing drug-free awareness efforts. This might include information about the dangers of drug abuse, available counseling and rehabilitation resources, and reinforcement of the organization's drug-free policy. The program should be more than a one-time notification. Reporting obligations require employees to notify the employer of any criminal drug statute conviction for workplace violations within 5 days. The employer must then notify the federal agency within 10 days after learning of the conviction. These reporting requirements must be communicated to employees. Environmental compliance certifications address requirements that may apply depending on your project's nature and location. NEPA requirements under the National Environmental Policy Act may apply to federally funded projects that could significantly affect the environment. If your project involves construction, land alteration, or activities with potential environmental impact, NEPA review may be required before funds can be spent on those activities. Environmental review may be required for projects with potential environmental effects. The scope of review ranges from categorical exclusions for minimal impact activities to full environmental impact statements for major actions. The agency determines what level of review applies. Historic preservation review under the National Historic Preservation Act may be required if your project could affect historic properties. This is particularly relevant for construction or renovation projects in areas that may contain historic resources. Consultation with state historic preservation offices may be necessary. Floodplain and wetlands requirements apply to projects in these sensitive areas. Executive orders require federal agencies to avoid supporting development in floodplains and wetlands where practicable. Projects in these areas face additional review requirements. Additional standard certifications cover operational requirements for federal grantees. Conflict of interest policies must be maintained to identify and manage situations where personal interests might conflict with grant responsibilities. These policies typically require disclosure of potential conflicts and procedures for managing them when they arise. Financial management system adequacy must be certified. Your organization must have systems capable of tracking federal funds separately, maintaining records of expenditures, and producing required financial reports. Inadequate financial systems can result in audit findings and questioned costs. Audit requirements under the Single Audit Act apply to organizations expending $750,000 or more in federal awards in a fiscal year. As of November 2025, verify current threshold. By accepting federal funds, you commit to undergoing required audits if your federal expenditures reach this threshold. Records retention requirements obligate you to maintain grant records for specified periods, typically 3 years after final financial report submission. These records must be available for audit or review. Certifying compliance commits you to these retention practices. Understanding consequences of false certification underscores why accurate certification matters. Disallowed costs require repayment when funds are spent in violation of certifications. If you certified lobbying compliance but used grant funds for lobbying, those costs would be disallowed and must be returned. Your organization would owe money back to the federal government. Award termination can result from significant compliance failures. If your organization fails to maintain certified compliance, the agency can terminate your award before the project is complete. This ends funding and may require return of unspent funds. Debarment excludes your organization from eligibility for future federal funding. Serious or repeated violations can result in your organization being placed on the excluded parties list, preventing new awards for a period of years. This can be devastating for organizations dependent on federal funding. Criminal liability applies to knowing false statements to federal agencies. If you knowingly certify compliance when you know your organization does not comply, this can constitute false statements under federal law. Criminal prosecution, fines, and imprisonment are possible for intentional fraud. Verifying organizational compliance before certifying protects against inadvertent false certification. Policy review confirms that required policies exist and are current. Do you have a drug-free workplace policy, a conflict of interest policy, non-discrimination policies, Review your policy documents to ensure they meet requirements and have been updated as needed. Practice assessment goes beyond policy documents to verify that policies are actually implemented in practice. Having a policy on paper is insufficient if the organization does not follow it. Assess whether your organization actually operates in compliance with its stated policies. Personnel check confirms that key personnel named on the application are not excluded from receiving federal funds. Search the sam.gov exclusions database for the organization and for each key person by name. Document your search and results. Documentation of compliance should be maintained to demonstrate your basis for certifying. Keep copies of policies, training records, exclusion search results, and other evidence showing your organization meets certification requirements. This documentation supports your certification if questions arise. Understanding who should sign certifications clarifies responsibility and accountability. Authorized representative with legal authority to bind the organization must sign certifications. This is typically the AOR designated in grants.gov. The signer commits the organization to compliance with everything being certified. Informed signer status means the person signing should understand what they are certifying. A signature should not be routine. The signer should know what commitments they are making and have a reasonable basis for believing the organization complies. Organizational responsibility means the signer acts on behalf of the entire organization, not just themselves. Their signature binds everyone in the organization to the certified requirements. The signer should have confidence that the organization as a whole meets the requirements. Personal accountability can attach to signers who knowingly make false certifications. While the organization bears primary responsibility, individuals who sign certifications they know to be false can face personal consequences, including potential criminal liability. This accountability motivates thorough verification before signing. Following best practices for certification reduces risk of compliance problems. Read before signing means actually reading the certification language rather than signing reflexively. Understand what you are certifying. If language is unclear, seek clarification before signing. Informed signatures are safer than routine signatures. Ask questions when uncertain about whether your organization complies with a particular requirement. It is better to delay and verify than to sign and hope. If you do not know whether your organization meets a requirement, find out before certifying that it does. Institutional support from legal counsel, compliance officers, or sponsored program staff can help assess compliance. These professionals understand the requirements and can help verify that your organization meets them. Use their expertise rather than making compliance determinations alone. Document verification by keeping records of how you confirmed compliance. Notes from policy reviews, exclusion database search results, and consultation records all demonstrate that you had a reasonable basis for certifying. Documentation protects you if questions arise about your certification basis. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson on assurances and certifications. Assurances and certifications are legal commitments, not mere formalities to rush through. By signing the SF-424B and related documents, your authorized representative makes binding attestations on behalf of your organization. These commitments carry legal weight and ongoing obligations throughout the grant period. Major certification areas include lobbying restrictions prohibiting use of federal funds to influence legislation or federal decisions, debarment certification confirming eligibility to receive federal funds, civil rights compliance committing to non-discrimination, drug-free workplace requirements, and numerous other operational commitments. Each area requires actual compliance, not just signature. Consequences of false certification can be severe, including disallowed costs requiring repayment, award termination, debarment from future federal funding, and potential criminal liability for knowing false statements. These consequences make thorough verification before certifying essential. In our next lesson, we will cover scoring rubrics deconstructed. You will learn how federal grant applications are actually scored, how to interpret scoring rubrics, and how to write strategically to maximize your scores on each evaluation criterion. Practice exercise. Obtain a copy of the SF-424B form. Read through each certification statement. For each major area covered, assess whether your organization currently meets the requirement. Note any areas where you are uncertain or where your organization may need to take action to achieve compliance.